How's everyone doing this morning? Good? Good. Well, I'm glad to be with you. I'm excited to be up here. Josh said, you can continue on, preaching through the book of John, or you can just talk about whatever you want. So I said, I'm going to talk about whatever I want. And I decided I was going to preach a message that I needed to hear this morning. So if it's one you need to hear as well, good. If it's not one you need right now, store it away for a day or a season when you do need it. Because I think at some point we're all going to need this. But if you're not there now, great. Ride that out as long as you can. But today we're talking about pursuing hope when we feel hopeless. And me, I'm a generally pretty hopeful person. I'm an optimist. I usually think things are going to work out in my favor. Like if I'm driving and I enter the back of a parking lot, I'm going to continue driving to the front. I'll pass by so many parking spots on the way because I know my God has one for me that's further ahead, that's closer to the front. I know that, and I'm usually right. And that's how I approach so much of life. It's like I just generally think things are going to work out, and probably a lot of that's based on my personality and also my experience. Or generally speaking, a lot of things have worked out. So I'm fortunate in that. With that said, I feel like in this season, I have felt as hopeless and as much despair probably as I have throughout a lot of my life. When I look at I'm talking just looking at the world, where we're at in the world, all the things going on, both whether it's in our community or nationally or globally, the level of violence we see, the level of division we see, where it seems like as people, we are so far apart. And even not just out there, but even within the church, it seems like, believers, are so far apart on so many things. And not just regular things that are actually really important. It feels like we are so far apart. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't know how we get back here. I'm looking at it, I'm just thinking I have no idea how this gets better. And there's a part of me that thinks I'm not sure that it will. That's what I feel right now. And yet, I believe that as followers of Jesus, we are called to be a people of hope. And to be able to live out that hope with the rest of the world as a way of bringing hope to them, to bring some light into the darkness that we see. And so the question is, how do we do that? How do we live from a place of hope when we feel hopeless? How do we pursue hope because we know we're supposed to be hopeful, but how do we do that when we don't feel it? When what we know in our mind doesn't necessarily connect with what's going on inside of us? And there's a lot of reasons we could feel hopeless. It could be, some of the stuff that I talked about, just the state of the world. Maybe there's something going on with you personally. Maybe there's some sin struggle that you've been like, man, I've been trying to overcome this for years, and I just can't get there. It just keeps rearing its ugly head and wreaking havoc in my life. Maybe it's money difficulties. You're stressed out living paycheck to paycheck, wondering, which bills am I going to pay this month? How do I make ends meet? Maybe it's health or family struggles or relationship issues or whatever it is. But there's so many reasons that we can feel hopeless. Hope is the belief that there is something better than we are currently seeing or experiencing. And I don't think it's just that the belief that good things are coming ahead, but even that there's good things going on right now that maybe that we're just not witnessing. Or we're not privy to. Now, let me say, I think it's actually really okay to feel despair, to feel hopeless. I feel like that's actually an okay thing. I think sometimes we can over-spiritualize things to a bit where it's like, but I believe in a God who is in control. Jesus is on the throne. My God is able, so therefore I shouldn't feel these things. And I just think, I don't know. That just doesn't seem realistic. That just doesn't feel true to our human experience where, God can see everything. God is all-knowing, but we are not. We kind of see what's right here in front of us, and this is our experience. And when it looks like that is dark and there's no way forward, we're going to feel hopelessness and despair, and I actually think that is okay. We have to choose where we go with that. What do we do with that despair? I think where we can get ourselves into trouble is thinking that the ultimate answer to our hopelessness and despair lies with earthly solutions or earthly things. Like that is going to fix all of it. But what I want to talk about is lasting hope. Because there might be solutions that provide us with a momentary relief about, whatever it is we're experiencing, and that's great, and those are good things. But what I'm talking about is how do we pursue lasting hope that can stick with us, whether we're on the mountaintop or whether we're in the valley. We can say, yeah, I still have hope because I know there's something good beyond what I'm seeing. How do we pursue that? In order to do that, I think there's a few things we can do to pursue that type of hope. And they all have to do with God. Just spoiler alert, they all have to do with God. Because I think lasting hope is not based on our life circumstances. It's not based on our ability to fix things. It's not based on who holds political offices. But it's ultimately based on who God is. And just as importantly, what do we believe about who God is? So I think the first thing we can do is we need to remember what God has done. We need to look back and remember what he's done. One of my favorite Psalms is Psalm 77. I'm going to use the clicker today. I'm going to do it. This is the thing that will sink me faster than any other thing, is trying to manage this clicker while I'm talking. But God is able, right? So Psalm 77. This is written by a guy named Asaph. I don't know a ton about Asaph. Maybe someone else does. All I know is from the psalm, he was going through something. He was going through a thing, and things were dark. But it's like 20 verses, so just stick with me. It says, for the director of music, for Jeduthun of Asaph, a psalm. I cried out to God for help. I cried out to God to hear me. When I was in distress, I sought the Lord. At night, I stretched out untiring hands, and I would not be comforted. I remembered you, God, and I groaned. I meditated, and my spirit grew faint. You kept my eyes from closing. I was too troubled to speak. I thought about the former days, the years of long ago. I remembered my songs in the night. My heart meditated and my spirit asked, will the Lord reject forever? Will he never show his favor again? Has his unfailing love vanished forever? Has his promise failed for all time? Has God forgotten to be merciful? Has he in anger withheld his compassion? Then I thought, to this I will appeal. The years when the Most High stretched out his right hand. I will remember the deeds of the Lord, yes. I will remember your miracles of long ago. I will consider all your works and meditate on all your mighty deeds. Your ways, God, are holy. What God is as great as our God? You are the God who performs miracles. You display your power among the peoples. With your mighty arm you redeemed your people, the descendants of Jacob and Joseph. The waters saw you, God. The waters saw you and writhed. The very depths were convulsed. The clouds poured down water. The heavens resounded with thunder. Your arrows flashed back and forth. Your thunder was heard in the whirlwind. Your lightning lit up the world. The earth trembled and quaked. Your path led through the sea, your way through the mighty waters, though your footprints were not seen. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. So again, Asaph, he's going through something. Something bad. Apparently. He's at the point where he's like, God, I think about you and I groan. And I'm wondering, have you forgotten to be compassionate? Have you forgotten who you actually are? Have you forgotten to be merciful? Is this how it's going to be forever? These are the thoughts he's having when he thinks about God. So he's going through something like, I don't know if it was a communal thing or something personal to him. I don't know, and it doesn't matter. He's hopeless and in despair. And what he does right there in the middle of the psalm, I'm sure you caught it when he says, but to this I will appeal. I'm going to look back. I'm going to look back on the things you have done. I'm going to consider your works and meditate on all your mighty deeds. And he looks back at a few things, but specifically it seems like he's looking back at the Exodus. When God's people were in slavery in Egypt and he delivered them, he does all these crazy plagues, gets them out, and then all of a sudden they're there against the Red Sea with their backs against it, with Pharaoh and his chariots storming toward them, and they're like, we're done. We're done. There's nowhere for us to go. And then God says, watch this. I'm going to make a way where there is no way. And he spreads the seas, and they walk through on dry ground. And Asaph, he's reflecting on this, saying, all right, so you did that. I remember your faithfulness. I remember how you delivered your people. I remember the things that you have done. Even though your footprints were not seen, I recognize that you were the one guiding us like a flock. And I think this is something that'd be good for us to practice. And actually, I'm going to be honest, I hate looking back and reflecting on the past. I don't like doing it. I'm not even sure why, but I just don't like doing it. So I really need to discipline myself to do this. But to actually look back and ask the question, God, what is it that I have seen you do? What have I seen you do in my life? What are the things, the ways in which you've delivered me? What are the ways in which you've guided me? And there's probably some things I can recognize. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember God doing this. But there might even be things, if I take enough time to reflect, where I look back and be like, man, I didn't even realize it. But this thing was God. It was one of those things where his footprints were not seen when it happened, but I'm looking back, I'm like, oh wait, but I recognize it was you guiding me like a flock. God, what have I seen you do? And not just what have I seen you do in my life, what have I seen you do in the lives of other people? What have I seen you do in the communities in which I've lived? What are the ways I've seen you show up, whether or not it has to do with me specifically? And I think when we can remember those things and recognize those things, it can give us greater confidence of, okay, if you've been faithful before, that means you're going to be faithful to the things that you've promised to do. Which is the second thing, is reflecting on what God has promised to do. So we remember what God has done, and then we can also reflect on what God has promised to do. And Scripture is just filled with, these ideas of like, what is it going to be like when Jesus comes back? What are the promises of God? What does the future hold? And one of my favorites, there's no surprise, is in Revelation 21. And Revelation is a book of the Bible where John, he's getting this vision from God about what's going to happen. And it's kind of weird, and the creatures with a lot of eyes and whatnot. But he's getting this vision about what's going to happen when Jesus comes back. And he records it. And this is what he says. In Revelation 21, verses 1 through 5, he says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away.' He who was seated on the throne said, 'I am making everything new.' Then he said, 'Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true.'" So John is seeing what's going to happen where God says, I'm going to make everything right. Every wrong you see will be no more, will be corrected. There'll be no more pain, no more suffering, no more sin. All of those things that you're experiencing, you're struggling, no more suffering, all of those things I'm going to make right one day. This is the hope that Paul reflects on in his letter to the Corinthians. In 2 Corinthians, he talks about, in chapter 4, he's talking about how as believers, yes, we have this hope from Jesus, but it's in these jars of clay, right? We're still in these mortal bodies that are fragile. We're still subject to our sinful nature, all of these things. And so in the here and now, we're still wrestling with all this. We see glimpses of the kingdom breaking through in our lives, but yet we still experience the brokenness around us. And he says even some of the hardships we're going to face will be because you follow Jesus. Because you follow Jesus, he might actually lead you into suffering. Then he says, what was that? Yay. That's right. That's right. Not the word I was thinking, but I'll go with it. But then he says, because the one who raised Jesus from the dead will also raise us from the dead. He goes on to say in verses 16 through 18, he says, "Therefore do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day, for our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." Paul's like, all right, it might be rough sometimes right now, but there's something good coming. In eternity, when he makes all things right, he's like, it's going to be so much better than any suffering you're facing now. It will be so worth it. So hold on. Hold on, persevere, keep going, keep putting one step in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, and continue persevering in faith, because there's something better ahead. And so I think we can do these things. We can look back, all right, God, you've been so faithful in the past, I see it. And because of that, I have confidence that you're going to be faithful to your promises moving forward. And I think when we do that, it can give us a hope that, empowers us to persevere. Not just survive in our faith, but actually persevere in our faith. However, if I'm being honest, looking back and looking forward, there's something about it that actually leaves me a bit unsatisfied. Like, I'm like, okay, so things have been good before, and things will be good again, but what does that do for me right now? It feels a little bit like telling a starving person, like, oh, think about all those great meals you had in the past. Oh, and trust me, 5 years from now, you're going to have the best meal of your life. And they're like, well, that's great, but I'm hungry now. I don't know if I'm going to be here 5 years from now. I don't know if I'm going to make it. So, like, it can feel a little bit like that. Yeah, that's a good question. But the good news is, I don't think God calls us to settle for just looking back and looking forward. I don't think he asks us to do that. I think he says, no, I'm doing things right now. And so we need to remember what God has done. We need to reflect on what he's promised to do. But I also think we need to recognize what he's doing right now. God is active right now in and through our lives. And maybe sometimes we miss it, but he's actually doing things right now that can give us hope for now. One of my favorite stories about this, or sort of demonstrates this, is in Matthew 11 with John the Baptist. Josh talked about him a handful of weeks ago. John the Baptist, he was like the man, right? He's one of those people. Most people in Scripture, even the heroes, we read some stuff about them. It's like, that wasn't so good. But John is no, he's kind of unblemished within Scripture. He did everything he was supposed to. He pointed to Jesus. That was his whole life. I don't know why. I don't know if living out in the wilderness and the locusts and honey thing, if that was his personal preference or if that was part of his calling. But he did it, right? And he's and everybody that came to him, he said, hey, he's here. The one we've been waiting on is here. And he did exactly what he was supposed to do. And in this passage we're about to read, he's in prison. He's in prison. And I've got to imagine John is looking around saying, all right, I did everything right, and why am I here? And it doesn't look like I'm getting out. And spoiler alert, he doesn't. He dies in prison. He's beheaded in prison, even though he was completely faithful. So we're going to read Matthew 11, verses 2 through 6. It says, when John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, he sent his disciples to ask him, are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? Jesus replied, go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me. So again, John is in prison, and this is the one, I think Jesus says something about him of those born among men, there's been no one greater than John the Baptist. And John the Baptist is saying, are you even who you say you are? Because I pointed people to you. I said, you're him, but here I am. And now I'm wondering, should I be looking for someone else? Is any of this even real? And that's where he's at. He's at a point of despair and hopelessness because of his circumstances. And what Jesus does is he points to what's going on. He says that the blind receive sight, the lame are healed, the dead are raised. All these things that he points to, they're all actually references to different parts of the book of Isaiah where God is telling his people what will happen one day when Jesus returns, when all things are made right. And he's saying, that's what's happening. That's who I am. All of these things that are pointing to, those are the things I'm doing. The kingdom is breaking through. That's what he provides him. And it doesn't change John's circumstances. He's still in prison. And like I said, that's where he dies. But God meets him in his moment of despair. Jesus meets him in his moment of despair and says, these are the things that are happening. And the thing I like about Jesus' miracles is they do a couple of things. One is they do point to a future reality. When he talks about, no more death or mourning or crying or pain, and we see him actually healing people physically, it points to that future reality to say, hey, it's coming. The kingdom is breaking through. It's not fully here yet, but it's breaking through. But it also shows that I think Jesus really cares about what's happening with people right now. He doesn't just care about the future. He cares about right now. The bleeding woman who had been bleeding for years, and she fights through the crowd, crawls through the crowd just to touch the hem of his garment so she can be healed. I don't think, I don't think he was saying like, all right, good, you're healed now, so look to the future. I think he's like, no, I want you to be healed right now. I don't want you to be bleeding anymore. The blind man that Jesus healed, I'm sure he healed plenty of blind people, but it wasn't just that. He's like, oh, well, again, I'm just trying to give a picture of the future. He's like, no, I don't want you to be blind anymore. I want you to be able to see right now. Lazarus, when he raised Lazarus from the dead, yeah, he was making a claim about who he was, but I also think he was really upset that his friend Lazarus has died, and he wanted him to be alive again. When people brought their sick children to Jesus, I think he healed them because he didn't want them to be sick anymore. He wanted them to be healthy and to grow up and have lives and have their own kids and have futures. When Jesus fed the 5,000, even his disciples were like, they're out in this remote area and Jesus is talking and there's no food. And their disciples were like, I guess we got to send them away to go get food. He said, why? We're here now. Let's feed them. They're hungry now. Let's feed them right now. I think Jesus cares about what's going on in the world and in our lives right now. But it gets difficult because I can't explain why he doesn't always do that. You know, and even at those times, there are plenty of people who died. He raised Lazarus from the dead and no one else. I don't know why. I don't know if he healed every sick person that was in the area he was. And even now, I'm sure it can feel like there's times where we are praying for something, good things, not selfish things, but like really genuinely good things. And sometimes it seems like people pray those things and those prayers get answered in the way that they were prayed, like, yes, God, you did it. And then there's times where it seems like they don't. And I don't know why. And I never will. And that's okay. But I do know I see enough evidence, in my opinion, to say, like, but I think Jesus cares about what's going on right now. And he's doing good things right now. I think we often miss it because I think we're drawn toward the negative. We're drawn toward what's wrong. And some of it might be our social media culture that does that as well. Some of it is, I think, it's just our human nature. But whatever it is, I think we're drawn toward that. And it becomes very easy to think that the darkness is all there is. The evil is all there is. Or, when we do see good things, I think sometimes we don't always attribute it to God. We almost treat it as like, oh, well, here's an exception to what's really going on. But when things are bad, when there's evil and violence and oppression and suffering, we say, God, where are you? Why aren't you showing up? How could you not intervene here? But then when we see beautiful things, examples of goodness and kindness and mercy and love and provision, I don't know that we always say like, oh, God, there you are. I don't think we often do that. I think sometimes we just think, oh, well, yeah, that's bound to happen. So I'm glad it happened. But we don't always attribute it to like, no, God, this is you. This is your kingdom breaking through right now. And so I think we need to recognize what God is doing right now, and I think we need to testify to it. We need to testify to what God is doing right now, so that way we're not only thinking about our personal lives, but we're hearing about what's going on with other people, so we can be encouraged by that. And so I'm going to take a risk this morning, and I'm going to leave some time for us to do that right now. For anyone to share, here's something I see God doing